Man, the wind was screaming through Manhattan's empty streets that night as I climbed out of my shiny black sedan and stepped into the chilly evening. The city glowed with lights and buzzed with people, but to me, it was like someone had hit the mute button on the whole damn world. I was running late again, same old story. Being the CEO means late nights and meetings that never end, and lately, I'd let the job swallow me whole. Walking through the lobby of our fancy apartment building, the usual city noise just melted away behind me. I didn't even clock the shadowy figures tucked in the corners or catch the quiet chatter of other folks living there. My head was somewhere else, stuck on this weird pressure in my chest, this nagging sense that something wasn't right. When I got off the elevator and stepped into our penthouse, the door flew open before I could even grab the knob. There stood Sophie, my wife of 7 years, looking drop-dead gorgeous as always, but something about her threw me off. That warm smile of hers didn't light up her eyes like it used to. She was all dolled up, which was odd for a random Wednesday night, and the scent of her perfume, some heavy, unfamiliar stuff, hit me like a stranger's handshake. "Hey, you're late again," she said, her tone way too laid back, almost forced. I was actually just heading out. I froze for a second. Something in her voice rubbed me wrong. It had an edge, a coldness I couldn't pin down. Sophie's never been icy with me before. I plastered on a grin and leaned in to peck her cheek, but she shifted back just enough to dodge it. "Where you off to?" I asked, my throat tightening up without warning. She paused, barely noticeable, before tossing out, "Just stepping out for a bit." No big deal. But that sinking feeling in my gut wouldn't quit. Something was off, and I knew it. I'd been so wrapped up in work, blind to the little ways things had shifted between us, but standing there, I could feel it plain as day. A coldness hung between us, and it wasn't just the damn weather. "I'll be back soon," she said, brushing past me to snag her coat. I stood there like a statue, eyes glued to her every move. As she turned to go, my brain kicked into overdrive. I'd seen her wear that coat before, for nice dinners or nights out with buddies, but never for some quick errand. My pulse started hammering as a rotten thought snuck in. Was she stepping out on me? "Sophie," I croaked, my voice barely squeezing out, loaded with something I couldn't put a name to yet. She stopped, glancing back over her shoulder, and for a split second, her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in forever, guilt, maybe? Or something uglier. She covered it fast with a smile, but it was too late. I knew. Didn't need proof or her to spill it, I just knew. "I'll be back," she repeated, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut with this heavy finality that squeezed my chest tight. I just stood there, staring at the empty spot she'd left behind, and for the first time in years, I felt this crushing truth I wasn't ready to deal with. Things weren't the same anymore, and I couldn't kid myself about it. The woman I thought I had all figured out, the one I trusted with everything, was slipping through my fingers, tangled up in some lie I wasn't sure I could untangle. I wandered over to the window and stared out at the city lights twinkling down below, but one thought kept bouncing around in my skull: was this the start of the end? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting for me to stumble onto it, something that'd flip everything upside down. Something that'd smash the perfect little life I thought we had to pieces. Standing there, gazing at the blurry glow of Manhattan, my mind wasn't on the skyline. It was on Sophie. My heart was doing somersaults, suspicion and dread knotting up in my chest. I'd always trusted her, no questions asked, but tonight, that frost in her eyes, it was different. Things had been off for weeks, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. Looking back, the changes in me and Sophie crept in slow, like a tiny crack splitting through a glass you thought was solid. It started with little stuff, Sophie pulling back a bit, spending hours yakking on the phone, sometimes cracking up loud at jokes I couldn't hear. I chalked it up to her job stressing her out, or maybe just a weird phase she was going through. But deep down, this quiet little voice kept getting louder, whispering that I was losing my grip on something big. I still remember how we first crossed paths. Back then, I was just another hungry kid clawing my way up at a tech startup, all drive and no chill. Then Sophie stormed into my life like a tornado, wild, free, with this killer smile that lit up everything. We met at some artsy gallery opening, and her laugh bounced around the room like the sweetest song. She was everything I didn't even know I was missing. Unpredictable, full of spark, she yanked me out of my grind and made me feel alive, not just some guy chasing the next win. We were glued at the hip after that, dreaming up our future, piecing together a life side by side. Sophie was my rock, the steady heartbeat in my chaos, and for years, we built something I thought nothing could break. From the outside, we looked perfect. I dove headfirst into work, and Sophie was right there with me, cheering me on. But somewhere along the line, I stopped paying attention to the little things that really mattered. She'd always been the life of every party, charming the pants off everyone without even trying, and I never blinked twice. I trusted her with everything I had, I thought I knew her. But now, standing alone in our apartment, I wasn't so sure anymore. Something in her had shifted, and I couldn't figure out when it started. That night she took off, I didn't even ask where she was headed. Didn't seem worth it back then, she'd always had her own thing going, and I was cool with it. But this time, it hit different. The space between us felt thick, like it was choking me. It was like she was fading right in front of me. That gnawing in my gut wouldn't let up, I had to know what was going on. I couldn't just sit there twiddling my thumbs. So I made up my mind, no more guessing in the dark. I was gonna chase down the truth, wherever it dragged me. The next few days were a mess of strung-out nerves. Sophie was barely around anymore. Her excuses started wearing thin, late nights at work turned into girls' nights with people I'd never heard of. She'd still flash that heart-skipping smile of hers, and I'd let it slide like a sucker. But not this time. Not when the trust one thought was bulletproof was cracking apart. I couldn't pretend anymore, so I called in a private investigator named Gabriel. Guy was quiet, sharp, and known for getting the job done. Discreet, too, which was exactly what I needed. I wanted someone to poke around, dig up whatever Sophie was keeping under wraps. I needed the real story, even if it tore me to pieces. As the days ticked by, my nerves were shot. Work didn't matter anymore, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping just beyond my reach. Then Gabriel dropped the bomb. He'd tailed Sophie on one of her nights out, and when I read his report, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. The truth slammed into me like a freight train, Sophie was meeting some guy I'd never heard of. They'd been at it for weeks, sneaking around behind my back. Gabriel even had pictures, Sophie laughing, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in forever. This dude she was with? Older, cocky, way too at ease around her. You could tell it wasn't just some fling, they had something real going. My heart dropped into my boots, and I couldn't catch my breath. My whole world, the one I thought was locked down tight, just blew apart. I couldn't tell what stung worse, the knife of her betrayal, or how slick she'd been about it, playing me like a damn fiddle. Sophie'd been feeding me lies for weeks, drifting away little by little, and I didn't have a clue. It wasn't just the cheating that got me, it was how she pulled it off, sneaky and smooth, carving out a whole separate life while acting like nothing was wrong. For the first time in forever, I started second-guessing myself. Had I screwed up somewhere? Was I so caught up chasing the corner office and stacking my empire that I missed the rips tearing through our marriage? Had I been too damn trusting, ignoring stuff I should have noticed? With the truth smacking me square in the face, I was a mess, pissed off, heartbroken, but mostly just hollowed out. The woman I'd poured my soul into, the one I'd shared every damn thing with, stabbed me in the back. Right then, I knew nothing was ever gonna feel the same. I wandered over to the window again, staring out at the city lights smearing into a fuzzy glow below. Part of me wanted to bolt, track Sophie down, get in her face, yell until I had answers. But another part, the one aching deep down, knew it was too late for any of that. The damage was done, trust blown to bits, and there wasn't a chance in hell of patching up what we had. All I could do now was figure out my next move. I plopped down in our dim apartment, my head spinning like a tornado, the investigator's report sitting heavy in my hands. My chest clamped tight as it sank in. Sophie wasn't just stepping out once or twice, she was full-on tangled up with some other guy. It wasn't only what she did, it was all those years of faith I'd had in her crumbling away like dust. I could barely suck in a breath, the air felt too thick, like it was strangling me. I tried to get a grip, slow down my racing brain, but every time I shut my eyes, there she was, giggling, brushing up against this stranger the way she used to with me. It turned my stomach inside out. How long had she been at it? How many nights had she been whispering sweet nothings to him while I was off in La La Land? Fury flared up hot and jagged, but the heartbreak hit just as hard, knowing I'd been living in some fake-ass dream. Hours crawled by, and I couldn't drag myself out of that apartment. The quiet was screaming in my ears, broken only by the faint buzz of the city outside. It felt like forever since Sophie walked out. I wanted to ring her up, demand she explain herself, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't fix a thing. What could she even say to make those pictures in my head less sickening? She'd double-crossed me, and I didn't need her to spell it out, the truth was right there, undeniable. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table, lighting up the dark with its harsh glow. I didn't need to check it to know it was her. Sophie's name blinked at me, her smiling face popping up on the screen, but I couldn't make myself pick up. What was there to say? What could she possibly throw out there? The silence between us was heavy now, packed with all the crap we'd never said out loud. I let it ring until it stopped, each chime pulling me deeper into this pit of feeling useless. As the night stretched on, my anger started cooling off into something different, something icy, more thought out. I figured jumping on Sophie right then would just play into her hands. She'd already twisted this whole thing her way, calling the shots like a pro. Nah, I wasn't gonna face her yet, not while I was still staggering from the hit, not when the truth had smashed me up so bad. Instead, I latched onto a new plan. I had to take back some control, grab hold of something I'd lost in this disaster, my own damn power. And the way to do that? I'd vanish. The idea of ditching it all, the life we'd built, the home we'd shared, lit a fire in me, a rush of grit I hadn't felt in a long time. I'd busted my ass for everything I had, and no way was I letting Sophie's cheating tear it all down without a fight. Her affair wasn't gonna break me, not when I could still snatch back what was mine. By the time she strolled back in that night, I'd already locked in my plan. I'd spent those hours plotting, figuring out how to vanish, how to reclaim the life I'd built without her in it. When she stepped through that door, I didn't know what I wanted from her, but it sure as hell wasn't some big happy reunion. The key scraped in the lock, and I didn't even glance up, just sat there in my chair, back to her, bracing myself like I was heading into a showdown I might not win. Her heels tapped across the hardwood as she crossed the living room, each click slicing through the thick air. That usual warm "hey" of hers. Nowhere to be found. Instead, this weird, tight vibe hung between us, like the hush right before all hell breaks loose. I could feel it crawling up my spine. Slowly, I got to my feet and turned to face her as she came into view. Her eyes caught mine, and for a second, I saw a twitch of worry flicker through them, gone quick, covered up with that fake smile that didn't even try to touch her eyes. "I'm back," she chirped, her voice too bright, like she'd rehearsed it in the car. I didn't crack a grin. Didn't even open my mouth at first. Just stood there, staring at this woman I used to love, now some stranger wearing her skin. My chest hurt like hell, but there was no turning back, I'd made my call. "I know," I finally said, my tone icy and flat, like I was talking to a ghost. She stopped dead, her eyes squinting a bit, trying to figure me out. The quiet stretched out, heavy and choking. "Where's all the stuff?" she asked, her gaze darting around the room. Took her maybe 5 seconds to clock that something was off. The living room, once warm with our pictures and little knickknacks, was stripped bare now, cold as a morgue. The walls, where our life used to hang in frames, were blank. Shelves. Empty. I didn't say a word right away. Just walked over to the door, swung it open, and stood there, like I was daring her to step in and see it for herself. She hesitated, confusion flashing in her eyes. "Nathan, what's going on?" she said, her voice wobbling just a touch. Deep down, though, I think she knew. I moved aside so she could walk past, my eyes tracking her as she stepped into what used to be our safe place, now just a hollow shell. She froze there for a long beat, the truth sinking in slow and ugly. Then she spun around to face me, her face white as a sheet, lips shaking. "Where's everything?" she whispered, barely getting it out. I stepped in behind her, my shadow filling up the empty space. "It's all gone," I said, my voice dead, no feeling left in it. "I took it, every damn thing. The house, the life we made, all of it." Her breath hitched, eyes bugging out like she couldn't wrap her head around it. At first, it didn't even seem real to her, like this couldn't be happening. But as she glanced around at the nothingness, it hit her hard. I'd wiped it clean. You're leaving?" she stammered, her voice so quiet it almost got lost. "I'm not leaving, Sophie," I shot back, locking eyes with her, steady as steel. "I'm already gone. Everything I busted my hump for, everything we had, it's done." Poof. Just like that. My voice cracked a little at the end, but I swallowed it fast, trading that hot anger for something calmer, colder. I wasn't mad anymore, I was finished. Done with her lies, done with getting played. Standing there in that barren apartment, it hit me, this was how I'd take my power back, by walking away, taking it all with me, and disappearing without a damn trace. Sophie didn't move, stuck there like a deer in headlights while a mess of feelings, shock, disbelief, panic, crashed over her. But it was too late. No sorry, no smooth talking could fix what she'd smashed. I was gone, and nothing was pulling me back. I slammed the door shut behind her, the bang ringing through the empty place like a gunshot. I stood there, rooted to the spot in the middle of the room, my brain scrambling to make sense of what just went down. The emptiness around me felt like it was closing in, those walls that used to hold our life together now just bare and lifeless, stripped of everything that made this place ours. My breathing came quick and shallow, my chest squeezing tight with panic city as I hunted for a clue, anything, to unravel this nightmare. But there was zilch. No trace of Nathan. No note. No, sorry, I bailed. I bolted back to the living room, my heels clacking loud on the naked floor, but the hollowed-out space just made that sick feeling in my gut dig deeper. My shaky fingers fumbled for my phone, punching in his number like my life depended on it. The screen lit up for a second, then kicked me straight to voicemail. Over and over. Every unanswered ring cranked my panic up a notch. "Nathan, come on, please," I muttered under my breath, the words barely slipping out as the truth crashed over me like a freaking tsunami. I stumbled over to the couch, the weight of it all slamming me down hard. My hands were trembling as I dragged them through my hair, trying to keep it together, but it was pointless. What the hell had I done? How did it all spiral to this? That affair, my little secret, the betrayal, it started out so small, like no big deal. Just a quick rush, a cheap thrill to spice things up. But standing there in that gutted apartment, it hit me how bad I'd misjudged it all. I'd been greedy, thinking I could juggle both, keep Nathan's love in my pocket while I danced too close to the flames. Turns out, fire doesn't mess around, it torched everything. Nathan had figured me out. He'd seen right through my act, and now he was gone, taking every piece of our life with him. I sat there in that dead quiet, and then my phone buzzed, a little ping cutting through the gloom. A text from Nathan. My heart did a flip as I scrambled to open it, my eyes racing over the short, sharp words, "I'm not coming back, Sophie. I took it all, and I'm done. Deal with the mess you made. Don't look for me." It felt like a kick to the stomach, cold, final, no wiggle room. No shot to plead my case. He'd drawn the line, and I couldn't erase it. The phone slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor as I buried my face in them, tears spilling out hot and fast. I'd been so wrapped up in what I wanted, chasing my own kicks, that I didn't see how much I was shoving him away, taking him for granted like he'd always be there. Now it was too late. No fixing this. My crying bounced off those empty walls, making the loss feel even sharper. I wanted to yell, to holler, to do something to rewind the clock, but there was nothing left to grab onto. Nathan was gone, and he'd taken the whole life I'd built my world around with him, the life I thought was mine. Hours dragged by, the night stretching out endless, but that ache inside me wouldn't quit. Out there, the city hummed along, folks going about their business, while in here, I was stuck with the rubble of my own dumb choices. I couldn't stay in that apartment, not surrounded by the ghosts of what I'd thrown away. I snatched my coat and bolted out, the icy night air smacking me in the face as I hit the street. But it didn't touch the hurt gnawing at my chest. My steps echoed down the deserted sidewalk, and with every one, I felt more cut off, more alone than I'd ever been. I didn't have a clue where I was headed or how to patch this up. All I knew was the life I'd been so damn sure of was dust. Nathan was gone. And now? Just this big, empty nothing. Wandering through the city with no direction, my head was a mess, regret, misery, loneliness swirling around like a storm. But one thing stood out clear as day: I'd lost him. I'd pushed him too far, trashed his trust, and there was no road back from that. I could have gone looking for Nathan, dropped to my knees begging him to take me back, but in my gut, I knew the ship had sailed. He'd made up his mind, and now I was stuck dealing with the fallout, all by myself. My phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't even flinch toward it. Couldn't bring myself to. It was the investigator, the one who'd been tailing me, snapping shots of those moments I thought I'd buried. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to shove down the panic clawing up inside me. I'd already lost it all, what else was there to dig up? The truth was out in the open now, no running from it. The city lights smeared into a hazy blur as I kept walking deeper into the night, each step pulling me further from the life I used to know. I didn't have a clue what I was chasing, but my feet wouldn't stop, and my brain wouldn't quit replaying the man I'd let slip away. As the hours dragged on, it hit me: the worst part wasn't just losing him, it was realizing I'd lost myself somewhere along the way too. The days after that blurred into this fog of regret and confusion. I wasn't the woman I used to be, just some faded version of her, stumbling through life like a robot, every thought eaten up by the giant hole Nathan left behind. I tried reaching out, fired off texts, flooded his voicemail, but nothing came back. Just silence. My heart felt as empty as that apartment we used to call ours. Everything familiar about the place, the couch, the kitchen, the damn walls, felt foreign now, like some twisted stranger had swapped out our old life for this dark, empty shell. Loneliness chewed at me from the inside, relentless and raw. I'd never clocked how much of myself was wrapped up in him. Nathan was my steady ground, the calm in my storm, and without him, I was just floating, lost. That affair, that stupid little fling I thought I could handle, had ballooned into this monster, choking me with the mess it left behind. I'd figured I could keep it all tidy, lock my two lives in separate boxes. Man, was I wrong. Work was a haze, I'd go through the motions, faking it in meetings, nodding at deadlines, but my head was a million miles away. Every call, every email, every little task felt like it belonged to some other Sophie, the one who'd been so cocky about her perfect life. The days stretched out forever, and when I'd drag myself back to the apartment at night, the quiet hit me like a punch, too loud, too heavy, screaming that Nathan wasn't there anymore. One night, after another pointless stab at getting him to pick up, I found myself standing outside our old place, staring at that door we used to walk through together. It loomed there like a wall, blocking me from something I ached for but knew I'd never touch again. I pressed my hand against the cold wood, fingers shaking, feeling like it was the last thread tying me to the life I'd wrecked. I couldn't keep kidding myself, acting like everything was okay when it was crashing down around me. I had to do something, anything, to patch this up, make it right. But no matter how hard I racked my brain for the perfect words or the magic fix, nothing clicked. The damage was carved in stone, and Nathan had laid it out plain. He was done. Gone for good. With a heavy breath, I yanked my phone out of my purse, my fingers hovering over the screen. I thought about dialing him again, pouring out apologies, begging him to hear me out. But the idea of his voice, cold, final, stopped me dead. I'd already shoved him away, trashed the trust we'd built brick by brick. No amount of groveling could erase what I'd done. I stood there, stuck in my head, weighing what to do next, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Nathan, it was a ping from that damn investigator. My stomach knotted up tight, and my heart did this little stutter step. What now? Was that investigator still keeping tabs on me? Was this some final nail in my coffin? With shaky hands, I opened the message. I've got info you need to see. Tell me when you're free. My brain kicked into overdrive. What could he have? The affair was already out there, plain as day. There couldn't be more to dig up, right? But this gnawing ache in my gut wouldn't let it go. I needed some kind of end to this mess. I had to know what he'd found, whether it was the last piece of this ugly puzzle or just another slap reminding me of everything I'd lost. So I made up my mind, I'd meet him. Not for some fairy tale fix, but for the raw truth I had to face, even if it hurt worse than what I'd already swallowed. We set it up for later that night. As I headed toward the spot he'd picked, a quiet little cafe smack in the middle of the city, I couldn't shake this feeling that every dumb move I'd made had funneled me right here. I'd screwed up big time, crossed too many lines, and now the bill was due. The place was low-key, the kind where folks go to fade out for a bit. The investigator was already there, tucked at a corner table, his hat pulled low, shadowing his face. He glanced up as I walked over, and I couldn't read a damn thing in his eyes. He didn't have to say a word, him just sitting there was enough to twist the knife of how much I'd thrown away. I slid into the seat across from him, my hands jittering as I clasped them on the table. I know why you're here, he said, his voice calm and even, cutting through the hum of the cafe. But fair warning, this ain't gonna be easy to look at. I didn't say anything back, just gave a tired nod. I was too worn out to talk, too beat down to hope for some soothing lie. I just needed it straight, no matter how bad it stung. He pushed a folder across the table my way. I reached out, my fingers grazing the edge as I dragged it closer. Flipping it open slow, I braced myself. Inside were pictures, way more than I'd figured on. Shots of me and that other guy, snapped over the last few weeks. Us laughing, hands brushing, caught in moments I'd told myself weren't real. Every photo sliced into me, dragging up the betrayal I'd tried to shove down deep. Then there was one more, a different one. Not of me. It was Nathan, caught from far off, his face a blank slate. In his hand, something I couldn't miss, a letter, with handwriting I'd know anywhere. My heart skipped hard. The investigator leaned in close. He knew, he said, low and steady. Found out way before I ever started digging for you. That letter? It's his goodbye, and a way to make damn sure you never forget what you pulled. My breath snagged in my throat, stuck there. Nathan had known all along, figured it out before I even had a shot to patch things up. That letter wasn't just him signing off, it was the knockout punch, the end of us for good. My chest clamped down, my eyes went blurry, and the full weight of it all crashed into me like a wrecking ball. He was really gone. That last flicker of hope I'd been clinging to. Ripped right out of my hands. I was left staring at the ashes of a life I'd torched myself. Tears started spilling as I sat there, and it hit me, there was nothing left worth scrapping for. All I had now was this void I'd carved out, and a long, lonely stretch ahead to figure out how to live with what I'd done.